Hello, all you spry tubers, twitchers, and pod people out there. Welcome to the Could You Do It Better podcast, where filmmaker, gamer extraordinaire, and the behind-the-scenes awesomeness known as Sesh, and the writing and directing sensation known as Maria discuss popular television shows and movies and answer the always controversial question of, could you do it better? Today, we will be discussing episode 1, the season 1 premiere of Ryan Condal's House of the Dragon television series, based upon George R.R. Martin's novel, Fire and Blood. And as for me, I'm Jonathan the intern, and unlike our two experts, have no industry experience whatsoever. In other words, I'm much like young Alison Hightower, daughter of the hand, as I am under weekly orders to pimp myself out in the nicest frock my mom owns, such that I can deliver my novella of a script to our royalty here. And now to Sesh and Maria. Woo!
Woohoo!
We're back. Oh my
Thank
God.
you for that intro.
Yes. No, thank you. Thank you. You know, I just read what I'm told. I don't even understand what I'm reading. So it's great. It's great. Again, we're back after The Watchmen. We had our start in Game of Thrones.
Yes.
So we're back at it again. Before we start, I should say spoiler warning. In this episode, we will be doing a detailed recap of episode 1 of the House of the Dragon TV series that will contain spoilers throughout. That's right. We will be spoiling the premiere in about 30 seconds. So if you haven't watched this episode and don't want to hear spoilers before you do, please feel free to put us on mute as you watch the episode, then rewatch our show afterwards. That's called double view counts, my peoples. And now, on to the recap as mandated by our legal department. In a world where history is narrated and captioned on a blank screen instead of acted, we found out that a woman has been passed over for promotion to president in favor of a man with half her experience and even less claim to the throne, simply due to her gender. Truly shocking, and I, for one, am glad this has never been an issue within human history. Jump forward 22 years, where we go on a 2-minute dragon flight. Ooh, ah. And we find ourselves in the new king's small council, where we learn that he has driven the kingdom into financial troubles, he has sores and infections from the throne not agreeing with him, and he has no male heir. You know what that means. Executive bonuses, baby! He gets so excited, he decides to run to his 18-month pregnant wife in the middle of water birthing to give her the good news that he's throwing a party they don't have the money to pay for to celebrate the birth of a boy that will finally replace that useless royal cupbearer daughter he has because she is a girl. What could go wrong? Enter his brother, Angry Doctor Who, Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, who decides the only correct way to party is go Judge Dredd on the local criminal populace in the city. I am the law. 25 minutes in, first sex scene. New record. Winner, Angry Doctor Who and a prostitute not to be named later. Skip ahead and it's time to partay. The whole town cheers on the Queen's labor, just like in real life. But what medieval party would be complete without jousting? Jousting, fun for the whole family until someone loses a pancreas, just like cornhole. And right on time, Angry Doctor Who shows up wearing the most non-functional and absolutely useless helmet ever and proceeds to trip a horse because Angry Doctor Who must be a dick in every scene. Meanwhile, childbirth is a mother. Intercut. And a fight breaks out at the sanctioned fight. Intercut to a forced C-section. Intercut back to the fight. Intercut again. Intercut to blood. Intercut to more blood. Intercut, intercut, intercut. Intercut to Angry Doctor Who losing a joust. But he's still so angry, so he beats up the better opponent. Intercut to more blood. Intercut to Angry Doctor Who grandstanding like an idiot before losing to a Dornishman. Take notes, Prince Oberyn. This could come in hand in 120 years. Intercut to yet more blood. Will this forced birthing scene ever end? Holy God! Finally, it's over. And shockingly, losing an entire body weight of blood during the delivery is indeed life-threatening. But hey, it's a boy! And the baby is dead now also. Jump cut to the funeral by Dragon, and jump cut again to the small council, where the hand displays perfect timing by bringing up line of succession immediately after the king lost his wife and child. Smart idea. I'm sure that will go well for him. But the king is not done yet, as he pimps out his own daughter to seduce her best friend's grieving dad by wearing her mom's clothes and reading him a history bedtime story. Honestly, this might be the worst player of the game since Ned Stark, and I'm sure it'll go just as well. Cut to our first orgy, a whole 52 minutes into the show, yet another record. Take a bow, you 50 or so extras. It is there where angry Doctor Who makes a speech that we don't get to hear, but instead gets exposited by the hand to drive along plot. So apparently soliloquies and whorehouses are not considered private counsel. Who knew? Wee King Milquetoast is shocked angry Doctor Who is angry and uses teacher voice to send him away. Yeah, that'll work. Wee King Milquetoast names royal cupbearer daughter Rhaenyra next in line for succession over her older male uncle twice her age, breaking the own precedent he set by making himself king. Irony. And sure, that'll work too. He tells her the big royal secret. Winter is coming. Same thing music, second time, same as the first. End scene. This episode was sponsored by the Historical Affairs Book Club. Are you in need of some nonfiction that stimulates even the most listless of readers? Whether it's a one-time purchase or our Book of the Month discounted details, here at the Historical Affairs Book Club, we offer antique illustrated parchment books that will open jaws, create protuberances, and make any bestie's dad explode in exultation. Historical Affairs Book Club. We put the affairs back in books. Back to you, Session, Maria.
Thank you for that recap. That's all of it is back in my memory now.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, if we weren't sponsored, we wouldn't be doing this show. So, you gotta. Yeah. That's right. Sponsored. Okay, so I think we're going to go ahead and kick this off. So, sure. Maria usually asks the questions. And,
all right, our first question of the evening is Hot D, buying into the hype or destined to wipe? All right, I think I am going to ask Sesh, what do you think? Is this show gonna go anywhere or?
Well, oh boy. So I am very intrigued with some of the drama. I think they are giving us a lot of red herrings with the characters. Story-wise, we just know that it all works out fine for at least another 50 years, like until, Robert Baratheon comes along and does some stuff. So story-wise, I'm usually way less intrigued with prequels. I was not excited to hear about it, to be honest. I can't decide if I like the characters so far. Not really, although I am interested in what they will do. And I'm hoping it still kind of feels like a Game of Thrones. Just definitely not peak Game of Thrones, but a lot of the vibes are still there in ways. It's kind of a rocky start. I feel like they need a little bit to get their footing, and they're not doing a great job of establishing yet. So
yeah, I agree in that. I think the people working on this show are up against a really hard, not impossible task. That is to make a prequel where the central question is essentially already answered by Goth and still somehow make it interesting. So I think the only way that can be done is with really strong characters that go through heavy transformations that tickle our fancy and actually answer questions we didn't even know we had from watching Game of Thrones. But from the pilot episode, I get more of the feeling that this show is more plot driven than character. And in that vein, I think it might not really strike where it needs to get that massive following Game of Thrones received. But, I could be wrong.
Yeah. Along those lines, here's the thing. The writing of the writing style, at least of Game of Thrones, it never did live up to the hype of the show, in my opinion. I thought there were some truly great moments and even some very good arcs, punctuated by tour de force acting performances by, Charles Dance, Diana Rigg, Peter Dinklage, just to name a few. But I also felt that there were just as many moments that dragged on excruciatingly long and felt like they were solely there to include the basest of violent and sexual behavior. And by the final few seasons, it felt to me like the show was constantly one-upping itself with depravity. So based off of that, I really thought they got in the way of what could have been a much tighter and better story, in my opinion. And that show had an absolutely massive following, obviously, with the biggest hype of any show out there. So for this show to live up to that level of hype, I think that's impossible. That said, I did have some hope that lessons would be learned from the original series and that perhaps could lead to a show that was more streamlined, more purposeful than the original series. That said, after the first episode, I feel that hope dwindling. As really, it seems even more frenetically paced, with less happening, less intrigue, and somehow even more meaningless sex and violence than the original series, all without really establishing the characters, aside from their most basic inclinations. So I'm going to say no. I'm not feeling the hype in this one, but I think the brand name here will do a lot to avoid this from being a total wipe. I think the series will have a fairly decent run, but it won't have near the success of the original show.
I definitely agree with that. I will say also that them pulling up a plot point of the White Walkers in this series was really disappointing.
Yep.
Okay, I mean, honestly, I'm gonna be upset if they even bring it up again because it's so stupid to have it in this. Like, we know for a fact it leads to nothing.
Yeah.
Why are they even mentioning it? Like, having a family secret about that is just, it would have just been better to have actually been like Lost to the Ages, and like it's just like not even going to be a plot device. It's going to be dumb. It's just going to be us seeing these characters that only know if, like, she's fighting for it. They're only going to know that they're correct because we've seen the future of the story. There's not going to be any validation for them. So I hope they drop it. I really do.
Yeah, and I mean, to further that, like, I'd go ahead and say, there is an argument to be made, hey, this is its own show. You can't compare it to Game of Thrones, throw that out the window. But it did seem like this episode did everything it could to be like, hey, we're Game of Thrones. This is Game of Thrones. This is Game of Thrones.
Yep.
We're all attached. Game of Thrones. Let's start by talking about Daenerys. Okay, let's end with talking about the White Walkers and Winter,
Well,
so.
I know where they're bred.
Yeah.
So, okay, next question. Was the central question for this pilot episode tantalizing enough for you? And if not, how could you have done it better?
You guys go first on this one.
All right. For me, I think the episode focused too much on the central question of the episode, which is, will Rhaenyra, am I saying her name right? Rhaenyra be chosen for the throne or some other male successor? I personally think it was too soon to make that an issue when I have yet to be properly intrigued by or introduced to any of the characters. I mean, I needed the first episode to get me asking why certain people behaved in the ways they did, and a mystery to get my wheels turning. For example, with Game of Thrones, the first episode was primarily action and a giant mystery that drew us in. I didn't really get either of those. Instead, I felt like the plot was being pushed on me instead of unfolding in a natural way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could have been tantalizing enough if there was just some more substance to it. For example, spending some time on Rhaenys Targaryen and Viserys Targaryen early on in the episode, showing that she was a strong candidate to the throne in her own right, only to be passed over for the weaker and hesitant Viserys due to his gender, I think would have helped. I think it also would have helped if they gave a bit more depth to Daemon Targaryen's character, something that showed him as more than basically an angry lunatic. For example, say he did give a speech in that whorehouse, but it was a solemn one, where he poured out a drink in sadness for the loss of his brother and his nephew, that was Prince for a day, to not make it through childbirth, only to leave, only to have the hand later misconstrue what he said to make it seem like he was celebrating the death.
Mm.
All while the younger Rhaenyra, say, acts in a seemingly more childish and spiteful manner. Just think of how much more depth that would have given the premise of the episode and how much better the opening scene and closing scene would mirror each other. As it was, it just fell flat for me, as most of the scenes were just one-dimensional with very limited depth.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree with that. Like, the central question of the first episode is just so weak. Like, it even took me a second to think about it. I was like, oh yeah, I guess it's, if she's gonna be the heir. I mean, was that ever not gonna happen? There was no question in my head. Like, it was answered way before they answered it, and it was even a little disappointing that they ended up answering it. I will say I had watched this with a friend, and like, she knew, we both obviously knew, like, oh, it's going to be a girl, it's not going to be a boy. And I was like, you know what? I mean, obviously, but they're really playing that up. So I'm actually going to give the show credit if it is a baby boy instead of a baby girl. So, a couple of points there for that. And baby not surviving was honestly a little disappointing too, because it would have been interesting to have a living child there that is not ready for the throne and that might have a target on its own back, and who would be protecting it, who would not be protecting it, and that it just could have added another element of drama, which would again slow down the question of just this one episode. Yeah, so plot wise, I'm oh boy, I don't think this is doing very good, but there are some character development things that I think are very interesting. So for Daemon, for example, I actually suspect he's not an angry lunatic at all. I think he is very stern. We did see him doing aggressive things at the very beginning, and they did make it very rampant, like they're raiding the city. But they did also point out that, in the end of that raid, these are criminals and they punish them according to their crime, which not so bad in my book. I mean, maybe, cut off someone's hand, like, it's excessive, maybe, definitely not excessive for this world. He was nice to his little cousin, niece, right? She says niece. Yes.
Niece.
So he was kind to her. He fought at the tournament. He did not kill the man that he lost to. He didn't do anything disgraceful there. They established that, okay, fighting's just the thing. He fought, dirty, but he didn't kill him, and he didn't kill him out of spite when he lost. So we've seen that kind of stuff happen in the series before. And I think it was kind of a shame of what scenes they are choosing to show versus not show. So I think his speech, as you said, might have been manipulated and misconstrued as something that wasn't solemn, when in reality it was solemn. Because if you watch the scene, he's sitting there just not enjoying anything while everyone else is celebrating, and he's treating them. He's just sitting there having the worst time ever at the house. So I suspect he does actually care. He does actually feel for his brother. He's not a lunatic. I think he's going to be a secret good guy who is very misjudged. Hopefully, but I'm just hoping for that, whereas I have very little other reasons to have any hope in the show so far.
So just the cut and exposition to like create it as a surprise later, where
yes. I think characters are going to surprise us with who is and isn't decent, but I'm also very disappointed so far with what they've been choosing to show us and not show us. So I get my hopes up when I look at it, but then when I look at it as a whole, I'm not so hopeful that this will be good.
Yeah, so is Daemon the character that interests you the most in this series?
Yes, that segues to our question of
Good segue.
what character interests you the most so far? Would you say that is your most intriguing character?
I'm curious with him. I'm also very curious with the Queen That Never Was and her husband. I think them two in particular, they might go the other way, where I feel as though they're making them very likable, but they are obviously very intelligent and have a lot of history. And I'm very interested in them. Honestly, I want to know more about them and their dynamic with the family. And you know, Evil Doctor Who as well would probably be my second or third. Like they're all three of them are tied basically with who I find most interesting. Our main girl, unfortunately, no. The King, no. Nobody else at all I think is interesting except maybe those three so far.
Yeah, I felt like most of the characters missed their chance to shine in this first episode. For example, I guess I'll bring this up. Damon's bad behavior is mainly talked about, and what we see of it is rushed and muted. Like they don't really
Yeah.
hold him very long. It's like the cuts are just like, hey, he's here, whatever. Even when people are goading him to give a celebratory speech over his dead nephew, they cut away. And like we've talked about, they had the king only talk about it in the hand. But what about us getting to be attached to him? We don't get that chance. Maybe they chose this for a reason in the future. His character's falling flat for me right now. Not enough time was spent on one character, or at least no one character made choices that were surprising and drew me in yet. The setup to the king's choice to end his wife's life to get a son was written all over the wall. I'm however, somewhat interested in Allison's character, as it was unclear where her loyalties lie as she is asked by her father to do the power play over Rhaenyra's head and still be her friend. Honestly, the most refreshing character for me was Rickon Stark's demeanor, as brief as it was.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't have much to add here, other than, I'm also intrigued by the Queen That Never Was, Rhaenys Targaryen. I think a lot of this obviously will depend on how they write her character, but I feel she at least has the setup to be a very strong character behind the scenes, similar to, say, Tywin Lannister, who you later find out to be politically savvy enough to turn this instability into a position of strength for her. Alicent Hightower, I also agree, could be interesting as a rival to Princess Rhaenyra. And yes, Rickon Stark's salty declaration was pretty great. That was like, oh my gosh, finally we have a little humor and levity in the episode, And I don't even know if it was intended.
Probably not.
Yeah, it's really difficult when you compare this episode 1 to the original episode 1 of season 1 of Game of Thrones, and just think about how well you knew everyone right away. You have, oh, here's our loyal man, here's this bratty girl, here's this little tomboy who's also a brat. Here are the Lannisters kicking kids out of windows. You get so much actual characterization and answers to those characterizations right away. Like, I don't actually really know if our little princess here, did she want to rule? Does she just feel bad she's not a boy? So like Arya, she just doesn't get to play with swords. I don't really. I'm kind of. She's just kind of vague. Vague against the grain girl, which is how she might be written by people who don't know women.
So since this is Could You Do It Better? Is there anything you believe could have been done better in how the show introduced the characters?
I can start with this one. I mean, but before I even answer it, just to quickly piggyback over what Sesh just said, because it falls in line, is imagine how much more fulfilling it would be, for example, if they had the princess actually watching the delivery of her baby brother.
Oh gosh.
where you go ahead and you start with her wanting to be a princess, actually, and, loving her dad, loving her mom, and you show her witnessing that where, they're the only two people in the room who aren't okay with what's going on there, and just seeing everything going on around them. And you just, that is more heartbreaking than any of the gore you could have shown in that scene, and then you basically go ahead and you have her like miserable, and then like her demeanor immediately changes, and then later that night she sees her best friend leaving her dad, the king's room. And so she goes down like to Valerian to go ahead and just look at him, like basically like imagining like flames all around, only for her dad to basically come down and be like, hey, so you're the new heir to the throne, and just see like the immediate like break just in her face as she like accepts her fate. Exactly, and that's what I'm saying. In any case, honestly, and that's just off of the top of my head, but I thought this episode was a complete mess when it came to the characters. It felt extremely rushed, almost like they decided they wanted every single character in the series to get some screen time. So they just went through them at a frenetic pace, like, trying to speed read a long shopping list. And, as such, almost every scene showed a character acting in a very generic, archetypal, and often one-dimensional fashion. I feel they should have used the episode to spend more time on a few of the major characters and really get a broader and more well-rounded portrayal of those characters, rather than try giving everyone some screen time. If you look back at Game of Thrones, again, sorry for the comparison, but they did it, so I'm allowed. So almost the main characters had enormous depth. And whether good or bad, they showed brilliant and varied shades of gray. And that's why those characters stood out so well. For example, Littlefinger, yeah, he was extremely ambitious and conniving, but he didn't need to show that in every single scene. In fact, it was his talks with Varys and everyone else where he wasn't being overtly conniving that gave him those humanizing qualities that popped. Same goes for Euron Greyjoy or Ramsay Bolton. Yeah, they were really bad guys, but they had humanizing aspects to them, and you had context as to why they were the way they were. Now you compare that to, say, the Hand in this show and Daemon Targaryen, and it's easy to see that a lot more work was needed here in the first episode. So for me, I would have cut the dragon flight scene, despite it being nice. I would have cut the Joust childbirth scene by several minutes. I mean, that thing went on forever. I would have cut the orgy, and I would have cut down the number of actors in this episode by maybe 50 to 75% to spend more time getting to know a handful of the characters a bit better. And I think that would have been a much better pilot than what's showed here character-wise.
I think the show should have introduced Rhaenyra playing some kind of chess or military game to show her keen mind against against one of the people in the council, to show it is clear that she can beat him, but she also has an understanding of politics. So she doesn't quite let him, she lets him win. She doesn't show how much better she is than they are. She then sees her father enter the courts and assumes her position as the cupbearer. I think the king should have been introduced with some warring group completely humiliating his wife for not producing an heir right in front of his daughter, and he stomachs it instead of standing up for his family. That, and then seeing her reaction and seeing her mom's reaction, and that I think would have tied together who they were and how they felt. I think Daemon should have been introduced wielding unbridled power and charisma amongst the townsfolk, only to show his grisly nature later. So basically, people do like him, yet he's rough. I mean, that's just a style choice. Maybe they do have him being something else, but show how people react to him with a mixture of fear and intrigue would be interesting. I also think not just with the writing. I think if the scenes showed the people with like different lighting, I feel like there wasn't much difference in the setup. Like everything kind of ran together. And that wasn't the case with Game of Thrones, I don't think.
Yeah.
It seemed like every setup was unique, so the characters kind of were a part of their scenery and you kind of connected with that. While everybody's in the same scenery, there's no difference.
Yeah, more interaction.
Very true.
Really, the only thing we saw that was different was when she was staring at, the skull of Balerion. That was it for the whole entire episode. So you bring up a good point there.
Yeah, like the way they showed that too, it should have felt way more magnificent than it did. It fell flat. Like I wanted to be impressed with how big this dragon is. Tell me a story about the dragon, make it more interesting. And it's like the story was just like lame. Oh, he's the last big one who saw these guys. Okay. All right. Anything else? Did he win any wars? Did he eat entire hordes at a time of cows? Like, did he hunt on his own? What happened? Was he, a baby to all the Targaryens, the most gentle of the giants? Like, I wanted to know. I don't know. It's just all of it really did fall flat. Like you said, like it's not dynamic. It doesn't show the different layers of the people at all. It barely shows layer one. I think there is a chance of Daemon having more layers, but everyone else, like there's just, there's just no conflict. There isn't any conflict. They were struggling to find and make believe this conflict, like the brotherly conflict with Viserys and like Daemon. It's like, okay, you didn't have me be your hand, and so I'm mad at you. That's it. He's been brewing on that for like what? They said it was like how many years? 20 years? 10 years? That's it. That's literally it. And like, oh, these people don't like him. And like, what's the princess's conflict? Well, they didn't even establish like any new conflict that was going on. Like it wasn't, nobody declared war. There was nothing. Like the conflict is that they're still really sexist in the world. Like you can have that, but that's just, oh god, it's just it's such lazy writing. Like just like, see, here's some sexism and we know that's bad, so we know all our bad guys and our good guys and who they all are now.
So women.
But it's there, and it's definitely an element in the series later on too. So like, oh no, they didn't solve it in the series. But yeah, like what's the conflict right now? Like there's no like major conflict. They have like no, what I wanted to see with this is I wanted a lot more hints. Like absolutely no White Walker crap at all. Completely unnecessary in this series. That is not a conflict at all here. It will not be. We know it. It will not be. Get it out of there. But I wanted to see stuff like, I want them to talk about like how they actually have used the dragons. So like we see a little dragon scene and it's like, okay, whatever. And then we see he has his red dragon, she has her little gold dragon, and like, cool, that's cute. Why? What do they do? What are they having them do? What do they train them to do? Like other than, Dracarys. But we already know. It's like not even a big moment for us, like in a way. Like there's just, the conflict's just not there. It's just this one thing very predictable happened is, oh, he's not gonna have an heir. Like that's it. So there's so much more that they could have done with everything, even by stretching it as much as possible with what they have right now on the characters and how little they've established them. All of them could have been done more, even making big reaches.
How do you think that, now we're going to the next question, how do you think that the cinematography and the directing appealed to you?
Not very appealing. I did like some. I don't feel like we got a lot of the grandiose of King's Landing as we've seen before. And it's tough because I did feel like they were trying to establish that again, but it's like it felt more just like, okay, we know this place, move it along. And like directing, all the acting I think was fine. Like they're all excellent actors. It was all very good. The only directing I think a moment I might have been able to appreciate was Corliss, I think I'm saying his name right, with the dreads.
Yeah.
So I think the only moment of directing I appreciated in this was him not accepting the wine during their meeting. So, and after also he was bringing up issues that are being, put off to the side that might actually be, worth bringing up to the council to deal with. So I got the sense just from that little thing that he's very clear-headed. He's intelligent. He's not going to just be in these meetings to drink. He has a purpose and he's trying to live up to that. And then I was very pleased to see that, oh, this one person with this one moment of directing I like, oh, who's his wife? Oh, that one other interesting character that we got almost nothing from, but there's a lot of potential in. So I was very happy to see them paired off, and that just made it all the more stronger that like now I know those things about her. I know she's clever. I know she's serious as well. I don't, because a man like that wouldn't marry a woman otherwise. So I got a lot from just that little thing that he did, and then seeing that it's them two together. Otherwise, like I think I despised the editing. I think it was really awful. I think we would have had like seeing the speech in the tavern would have been excellent to see for us to decide. I think the cutting between the fighting and the elbow deep in a pregnant lady's abdomen, that kind of stuff would have just been better, just completely not edited like that at all.
Yep.
So I think that it's very, very little that I liked with the directing. Like the actors some actors can act through bad directors. But other than that little moment in the council meeting, it's hard for me to appreciate any of it.
I do want to cut in here a little bit because, it could be easy because it obviously sounds like most of us aren't huge fans of the episode, but it might sound like we're attacking the director here, but I don't think we really are. Like here's the thing: the director is Miguel Sapochnik, who, I mean, many awards for this. He's the same director who did Battle of the Bastards from Game of Thrones.
Really?
Which was the absolute best episode of Game of Thrones as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
I mean, to cut in too, I will say this is probably more of a writer's issue and what they were needing to show, and it absolutely hurt. I'm sure there was some oversight with because a director on a TV series is definitely not the say all be all. So I don't really blame the director for this. I think he took the moments that he could, and there were not written in there for him to take a lot of good moments.
Right. Like for me, I don't know if it was the writing. I don't know from a directing standpoint. Something felt like it just went wrong with this episode. Like I'm not sure if they had the draft of the script in and it got returned from the network, basically saying, hey, we need more of this here, we need more of this here. I'm not sure if, again, say the creators of the show, like I know George R.R. Martin, he was in part of this, more so than even the original Game of Thrones. So I'm not sure if he wanted to make sure that all of the characters were made, but it seemed like how the script was written, it seemed like it would be very hard for anything to really shine in this one. I mean, I do think the directing, could have been better. Like for me, I should have counted the number of cuts in this episode. I mean, it like there was a cut once every 3 or 4 seconds, and so for me, everything felt just really choppy and almost in fast motion, while the storytelling itself felt plotting and expected. It was a very surprising direction to go, in my opinion. There was this very strong deviation from the original series. This directing style seems like a better fit for a very high-paced action movie featuring, main characters who can't practically complete the stunts that they're tasked to do. So you have to cheat through the use of cuts. For a historical fantasy series, usually longer, more seamless scenes would be far more fitting, in my opinion. And knowing Miguel Sapochnik's previous work, that is his previous work. So it just, there was a very major gap here from I think how the story typically is told. Maybe that's it. Typically, you direct it as such. This was directed much differently. And I know they want things to be very different from Game of Thrones, or to have some differences in how they're showing the episode and the scenes, but I don't think this is the direction that that they're intending here. On the bright side, the lighting was much better than in the final season of Game of Thrones, so that's a plus. And the dragon flight scene was beautiful, but yeah, I'm with you. I really, the only directed scenes that I enjoyed, I'm with Sesh, I think, were the small council scenes, which seemed underwhelming, but likely and almost assuredly will have much larger effects later.
To me, I felt like the scenes weren't shot with the characters in mind as much as the general storyline. I'm not a fan of how they did the delivery. It was extremely traumatizing to focus on, and I get that's what they were trying to get us to feel, is angry and rage about how she was being treated. But I felt like the foreshadowing that led up to it was more like neon signs blaring that she wouldn't survive the birth. But back to the question, I didn't think there was a lot of time and thought put into the setup of each scene visually. So why hurt me like this? Why are you going to start off with traumatizing me without any extra layer of depth? Like, I already know what you're going to do. I already get the point. It's just feeding into something just to feed into it, which hurt my feelings and gave me nightmares. Yes. I don't know.
Yeah. And, I know some people go ahead and say, well, going ahead and interspersing the delivery with the jousting coliseum that clearly looked like a uterus would,
That's right. It does. I didn't know.
Would go ahead and be like, wow, this is artistic. This is monumental. But it's like.
I mean, that's why I love it, because it's so not. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's really bad, because I'm also like, wait, why are they all fighting? Aren't these like everyone's like heroes, and all of these are house names, and they're just like they're just mutilating each other, and this is just why?
Yeah. To that point, for everybody's most important question: sex, gore, and violence. To your liking, what do you think, Sesh?
I mean, like, okay, so like, yeah, these fight scenes were fine, good for them. Like, there was a couple of fun little bits, or like, ooh, they really do get hurt jousting, because I feel like I don't think we even really saw that before. It's not really like, okay, cool, like, oh, neat, jousting could be bad, and they start fighting. It's like, okay, but why? Like, why are you fighting? You're killing your friendly neighbors with house names? Like, this is okay, that's dumb. And then like honestly, like I watching fake stuff, it's hard for me to find my trigger points, even with like something like this. Like, real is totally different for me. I can't like look at a sprained ankle. But like, I could watch this TV, because for me it's very fake. But it was almost like, I mean, I don't want to say watch it all the way through because of what it is and the content. But also watching it all the way through is almost like ridiculous gore. It's almost funny because it's so bad. When I said like their elbows were all the way in, like that's what it looked like. Like why are there like because yeah, and so they're doing a non-advanced medical C-section basically.
Yeah, that's the
Except it's not. It's so
yeah,
not.
new
Like
and
it is.
improved doctor.
It's an autopsy cut. Yeah, it's an autopsy cut all the way down, and their arms are in her for the entire fight scene. This goes on for not instantly dead. Like she's not. She would not. There wouldn't be screaming. There wouldn't be a back and forth like ow it hurts that she was doing while this is all happening. It's the blood loss. Yeah, immediately it's all there. It goes peacefully. It's not gonna be in her gut. Like I'm sorry, but it got to the point of being ridiculous that she was alive as long as she was, just to be screaming while these other were intercutting with this other fight. Like it's I mean, like I don't want to say it, the more I'm thinking of it, the more I'm like laughing, but I kind of am. Like it wasn't good. Like on top of us already just knowing this is going to happen. We know she's not going to be around for episode 2. We just know this already because they're not subtle. And this is like beyond not subtle with what they were doing. Like she was alive long enough where I'm like, wait, like is she gonna make it? Like is this that silly? Yeah. Like it was just it's just and then like the intercutting and like I did see their little thing at the end of the episode where it's like, remember how she said this is a woman's battlefield? I'm like, no, this not, she's just being okay. she's just being cut open. Like that's not a battlefield. Like this isn't. Also, that's stupid. But like what is this? Like there was so many elements of like the original series where like yes that is the woman's duty and all of that. It's just whatever how we're built in this world. But there were a lot of elements of like Catelyn Stark of just being such a backbone and having just such words of wisdom and counsel. Like they really had them where like, okay, they're not the leaders sometimes, sexism, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But they had their husband's counsel. Like they were somebody for them to talk to. They were somebody that they can converse with, that they can plot with, that they can make these plans with and do all of these just they had an intelligence to them. And like we definitely did not see that with his mom. Like it's just there wasn't anything there for it. Like and they again like it's just they made it so predictable and then it was just so like Gore can kind of be fun when it's like, oh whoa, that's gross and kind of neat that they showed something like that, but like this was like surprise. This wasn't that. Like it was very not like depraved. It was depraved for like not. It was depraved and it didn't realize it was depraved, which is the point of doing depraved gore. You have to know it is. You have to know that you're like going for crazy shock value. You have to not be silly with it. And this was like kind of borderline silly, which should not be what it is. There's no way they were going for that. Like
it's a big why,
Yeah.
Why. I was able to tolerate all of that in Game of Thrones, like the gore and the violence and the sex and all that, mainly because the characters were interesting. And I thought a deeper message was trying to be told in a very interesting and mysterious way around it. And I let the violence and the sex pass because it felt like, well, it's genuine to the medieval type setting of the times. And that's what the characters would do and that kind of thing. However, in this series, it feels like it happens before any characters are developed. And it doesn't have a ton of bearing on the story. So it feels superfluous. Yeah. It's just there for its own sake. And it feels intolerable to watch. Like, why do I have to see this woman brutally bleed to death for the story. It didn't help the story. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement. Like there's no way around it. It was absolutely senseless in this episode. I mean, there was zero reason for any of it outside of the Kingsguard's attack on the criminal elements in the city. Like it's like, okay, that's a plot point.
Sure.
Everything else, it just felt gratuitous, simply to be gratuitous. And, in my opinion, it completely took away from the story instead of adding to it. Yes, Game of Thrones certainly had more than a fair share of sex, gore, and violence, but I at least felt in many of those scenes there was a reason for it.
Mm-hmm.
This felt beyond forced, almost like they did it because they needed to meet, some sort of sex and gore quota as mandated by HBO. I mean, honestly, the whole thing felt asinine to the point where I was openly questioning why am I spending time watching this? And this is coming from someone who I very much like the Saw movies. Love them. I like gore, I like horror.
Me too. That's why this was so off.
Yeah, this was like,
it was pointless and they kind of missed the tone. There was, I don't want to say like there was, because a lot of the violence that we do see too is except for the mother, the queen, we don't really see or know anyone who any of this violence is happening to, which I mean, thinking back, I feel like a lot of the violence we saw, why so much of it was crazy, is because they were characters we knew, and that had character development happen to them. I'm sure there's a lot of scenes where it is just have some violence with a bunch of randos. It's just rando violence, right? But a lot of the times with those scenes, I feel like we got the characters' reactions that have names. Like we kind of got to see their reaction to it. Like they were able to notice it. They were able to react to senseless violence.
So we have a question from one of our listeners, Party Poopa 8. Do you think the time period gives good justification for the violence and gore?
I can take that one a little bit before passing it off. I think that's a great question. Because yes, it's a dark time. Clearly you don't have modern medicine. Like you have a different sense of morals and ethics. There's disease, other things like that I do come into play. But I would say that if you're going to go that route, do it in a way that progresses the story, that adds to it, adds intrigue, adds something additional to the scenes. Be like, for example, I'll go back to Battle of the Bastards because we already brought it up. Yes, seeing like people trying to climb through bodies to avoid suffocation, or die in the mud. Like they're
sorry, I had a funny thought, but I'll get it too afterwards.
I have a feeling I know where you're going, but there needs to be a reason for what they're doing. And I'll say again, you have the princess in there watching this happen to her mom. Okay. That's a reason. Yeah. I still wouldn't have spent so much time on it, but that's a reason.
Blood splattering on her.
Yeah, but it's like, what was gained from it would be my question.
That's a very good question.
You didn't learn anything about the father, the king. Right. You didn't learn much about the medical staff other than they don't really care, what the woman thinks.
Right.
We did learn something.
It didn't change.
With this era, we did learn something.
What's that?
They should have sanded the throne a little bit so it would stop cutting him and giving him infections.
There we go.
Obvious foreshadowing. I mean, I don't know what episode he's gonna die, but we all know he's gonna die probably real soon. He's literally just sitting on the throne getting himself cut up. He got his finger cut. We saw the back wound. Is nobody gonna sand this or cushion it or make it a little bit more comfortable? We do see that they, sand it and do stuff to it over the next 100 and 70 years, because all of the knives aren't there on the walkway up. So they did something. They realized it eventually, but yeah, it's just spiky throne that literally stabs who's on there. As far as time era and the violence for it, I mean, it's all made up, so sure. So that's actually what made me think of the king and stabby throne. It was because like it's they're in a peacetime in this era that we're at and currently in this episode. There's no wars breaking out really. Like it's not, like there's not really again a justification for any violence in this episode. They really shoehorned it in essentially. But seeing stuff like if you do want to get into period piece and compare it to real history, and there's just not like advanced medical technologies or understanding, that made me think of his back wound and just how terrible all the clerics and everyone is in this makeup era. So I'm a little excited to see if they do, how they're going to do that with him. I honestly kind of think of that too. Like he literally is going to die because he sat in the chair. Like it's kind of going to be a funny death for a king.
I don't know if it's just me, but I didn't really feel like I was in that place, in the location. I didn't get the sense of immersion into their world.
Like it was all CGI and they didn't do or build anything. Which I don't know. I mean, I might be wrong on that, but there was something flat about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, now comes to the big central question of our show today. Will we continue watching, and how do we rate this episode? You want to start off, Jonathan? You look excited.
Oh boy, yeah, excited. Oh man, I always feel bad for stuff like this because I hate giving bad reviews. I mean, this is somebody's creative work, and they go there. But I'll be honest. This was a positively brutal episode for me, and very worrisome as a premiere episode. As in my opinion, a lot of work is needed to bring this to a level of quality that a long-running show deserves. Overall, I give this episode a D minus, like maybe a 3 out of a 10. Which, for the record, that's lower than I rated anything from Game of Thrones, even season 8, where that episode was shot entirely in the dark. That said, I will give it this. Pilots do sometimes fall flat. It needs to be known, and it does sometimes take shows several episodes to find a rhythm as they spend more time on the individual storylines and the characters rather than the introductory world building. And I think that was the main problem here, is that their world building this episode was just not good. I think if they would have condensed it on just a much smaller part, it could have been really successful. But it just seemed like they were trying to take on everything and just put it in the episode, and you just can't do that for a show. It doesn't really work when you have something this complex with this many characters, with this many storylines. So as such, I'm willing to watch a few more episodes to see if the show can progress to the point that's needed. And I do think that's only fair. Like, and if it does, great. I'll continue watching it. Wonderful. But based off of this first episode, I'd be lying if I said my hand wasn't creeping towards the big red eject button right now.
Yeah, for me, 2 out of a 10. I might watch one more episode to see how the mature characters take on their roles, and if maybe they just need an episode to get into stride with that. I just didn't like how I was treated. I felt like as an audience member, I was a bit abused. It just didn't feel good. I didn't feel like the development was there. I didn't feel like I was, I don't know. I guess a strange thing that pops into my mind is I don't even know what temperature it is there. Like, you know, the game of like in the beginning, it's like, oh, it's cold. Like we're batten down. Like we're here. We're suffering. You know, it's like what you don't even know. What they don't take me to a place, I guess is what I'm saying.
That's a very interesting point you bring up too, because thinking on it, I mean, not only do we not really have any good original music, we don't have our opening at all. We have nothing. Couldn't be blander. I also feel like a lot of the wardrobe choices were very they weren't distinct. I don't want to say they were bad because you know it's all lovely and stuff, but they definitely were not distinct at all. Whereas I think that was maybe one of my most favorite things that they did in the original was you could kind of just tell who or where someone was from based on their clothes, even though there were multiple, you know, flowy clothing looks in the warmer climates. There were multiple winter looks. There were multiple cold climate looks. Like there was so much diversity in like just what their wardrobes wore that it actually you could just pin out who was who from that alone. And that kind of wasn't really in this so much either. I mean, and we've kind of seen what the Targaryen outfits are. I would assume something similar to what she was wearing throughout the later seasons, especially. And I didn't really see that reflected in what we were seeing them wear. Like they kind of still just look like Lannisters to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so for me, like, I just want to talk about the clothes because that just popped in my head. But I give it maybe a 4. I definitely would echo, and it's basically all just on potential, not at all based on what I've actually seen. So it has, like, I am intrigued. I don't know what direction some of the characters will go in morally. Like I said, I suspect Damon is going to be more good than they've led us to believe. They're just red herring him, I think. Carlos and the Queen Who Never Was, I do suspect they will be very good and likable, but then also very conniving, and I think they might do some very evil things in the future possibly as well, which would be very interesting. Other than that, I don't think anyone has any potential to surprise anyone. But I will also echo too that I have ended up liking a large amount of shows where I really do not care for the pilot. So, again, another thing that isn't something I've seen that I like. I haven't seen anything I liked yet. I just see the potential to like it.
So I guess we're here next episode then.
Yeah. So, I guess it's outro time, which I still haven't written after all of these years.
That's fine. You can do that while we are also talking about like why don't we just completely suffer through the entire series no matter what and just hate ourselves and watch a bad series.
If there is another delivery on this show, I am running away. Okay.
Look, I'm just saying, I mean, if you want to watch a bad thing also, like if I can get through the entire Resident Evil series, I think I can get through this. I don't think this is going to be that bad compared to that one. It could be very bad.
Elbows, Sesh, elbows. Come on.
And on that note, and our word of the day,
TBD if we're doing more of this series, I guess. The unwatchable.
it is time for our outro. So all of you tubers, you Twitchers, you pod people, and I think recently Spotify.
Yes.
Oh, we did get it. Okay, and Spotify. I'll have to come up with a good name for you people.
Spotters.
Spotters.
Spot a fly.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you all for watching and listening. For those who again participate in the stream, thank you so much as well. Honestly, this means a lot to us. Since you got through this whole thing, feel free to share, like, subscribe, heart, thumbs up, and whatever Spotify does. I'll get back to you on that in the future. But thank you so much for watching. You know, we like entertaining people, and we like talking about the show.
So next Monday night at 8?
Yes,
Is that when it comes out, on
yes,
Sunday?
next Monday night, 8 p.m. Pacific. I think we'll go live again to discuss the next episode, episode 2. So that is 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern time, and we'll go ahead and hope to have a lot more fun than we had this episode. I have a hard time believing this next episode is going to be as bad as this one. I can't imagine it. I gotta be.
See, that's the hope I'm talking about. Is it possible it's gonna get worse?
And on that note, until next week, could you do it better? All right, bye guys.
I was not ready for that song.
All right, we did it.